Hey everyone, we know how hard it can be to keep up with the latest news in Israel, so if you haven't had the time to stay on top of what's what in the Holy Land, have no worries. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and this is ILTV's Weekly Review. Well, terror is again rocking the heart of the nation. 3 terror attacks have been carried out across Jerusalem and the West Bank in the last 12 hours alone, leaving dozens injured. Now, most recently, an Israeli has been injured in a West Bank shooting attack near the Dolev settlement in Judea and Samaria, or the West Bank. And the Magen David Adom ambulance service says the victim is fully conscious with a light injury. The terror incident was apparently a drive-by shooting, and the assailant has fled the scene.
This comes less than 2 hours after yet another shooting, this time in Jerusalem's Old City. An Israeli police officer was injured after being shot at by an Arab Israeli resident of Haifa. And that shooter has later been identified as a man in his 40s who was recently converted from Christianity to Islam.
Meanwhile, 14 people, including 12 soldiers, have also been wounded in Jerusalem in a suspected car ramming attack this morning. Police and medics say that 2 of the victims have been injured seriously.
כוחות משטרה שהגיעו למקום ביצעו סקירה של הזירה. אכן במקום נראו מספר צעירים שמקבלים טיפול ראשוני על ידי מד"א. כוחות משטרה ביצעו מרדף אחר הרכב, שכרגע אנחנו במצוד אחר הרכב כדי לנסות לאתר אותו.
The incident is reported to have occurred just shortly before 2 in the morning, and the suspect drove into the Israeli crowd as they were standing on the sidewalk next to the first station, an entertainment hub in the capital. But in seconds, the driver both hit his alleged targets and was off, fleeing the scene. And while the suspect's car has since been found outside of Bethlehem, the suspect, him or herself, is still at large. Now, this incident also follows dozens of other clashes across Gaza and Judea and Samaria, or the West Bank, that have increased in severity in the wake of the United States peace plan. The Hamas terror group in Gaza, for one, has been calling on all Palestinians to step up their confrontations against Israel, and many have answered the call, throwing stones, Molotov cocktails, and more all over the region.
In related news, Palestinian violence hasn't only been shaking the capital. As we've discussed, it's also been spreading wildly across the West Bank and Gaza, and Prime Minister Netanyahu is now threatening severe action.
Starting in Judea and Samaria, or the West Bank, 17-year-old Palestinian Mohammed al-Haddad has reportedly been killed by a shot to the heart in Hebron. He was taking part in violent riots in response to the United States' peace plan. Then in Jenin, more clashes broke out as soldiers were demolishing the home of terrorist Ahmed Kunba. Kunba assisted in the attack that killed Rabbi Raziel Shevach in 2018, and his home was originally demolished that same year, but it's since been rebuilt. Still at the demolition site, Palestinians opened fire upon and threw explosives at Israeli troops, who responded with force, killing 1 Palestinian police cadet and injuring another. But it's not yet clear if they were participating in the riots or just hit at the crossfire. The IDF, however, says that they were fired upon first, firing back in response. Now, as for Gaza, 2 mortars have just been fired into Israel overnight, and the IDF hit multiple Hamas targets in return. But at least 13 rockets and mortars and dozens of explosive balloons have been launched into Israel from Gaza every day for the past week, and several Israelis are injured. One victim includes a 3-week-old infant who was seriously hurt when dropped by her mother as they were running to safety. Then in another incident, kindergarten staff in southern Israel can be seen desperately hurrying their crying kids to the shelter away from an explosive balloon that floated towards their play area. While IDF spokesperson Hidai Zilberman says that the IDF will not allow this situation to continue. And then, similar to his threats in September, Prime Minister Netanyahu says that if necessary, a large military operation in Gaza could come about before elections.
The Palestinian Authority has cut all ties to the United States and Israel, including security coordinations in Judea and Samaria, or the West Bank. Or at least that's what Palestinian Authority President Abbas is telling the world while speaking to the Arab League in Cairo.
نبلغكم هنا بأنه لن يكون هناك أي علاقة معكم ومع الولايات المتحدة. قلنا نفس الكلام لأمريكا بما في ذلك العلاقات الأمنية في ضوء تنكركم للاتفاقات الموقعة والشرعية الدولية.
You heard the man. All ties have been cut between the Palestinian Authority and the United States and Israel, including security coordinations. And it's all because of the United States' peace proposal, which Ramallah rejected long before it was unveiled. But quietly speaking, senior officials in the PA say that no such thing has occurred. In fact, in an interview with the Times of Israel, the official says that until now, coordination is ongoing, but relations are extremely tense. That said, it was always suspected that coordination would continue because Israel helps the PA fend off terror groups like Hamas and the Islamic Jihad, as well as lone wolf attackers. Meanwhile, Palestinian officials are also now jumping on the anti-land swap bandwagon, sparked by the so-called deal of the century's suggestion that the future state of Palestine should absorb Israeli Arab cities in the Triangle. The Triangle is an area southwest of Haifa on the border of the West Bank, and it includes 14 Israeli Arab towns with over 260,000 residents who often identify as Palestinian themselves. But the Triangle communities have started protesting the idea of losing Israeli citizenship, and now so is the PA. Authorities in the Palestinian Authority's Prime Minister's office say that even if a state is established under the Trump plan, the PA will not include these towns. And anyway, they say that the plan is unrealistic because it requires consensus, which it certainly does not have.
After a nerve-wracking 24 hours, the results are finally in for the Iowa caucuses, or at least part of them are, and we have a sense of which Democratic candidates may be taking on U.S. President Donald Trump. Well, joining us now via Skype is former Israeli Deputy Minister Michael Oren with what this means for Israel. So, Michael, people are surprised by the unorganized first caucus in the Democratic primaries. What happened here, and what does it say about the state of the party?
Well, it was a poor start to the Democrats' primary season, an attempt to use a new application for voting to show the Democratic Party was sort of high-tech and savvy, and it collapsed. And very embarrassing, and provided ammunition for the Trump White House to say, hey, the Democrats think they can run the country, they can't even run the primaries in Iowa.
Right. Now, as of now, it seems like Pete Buttigieg and Bernie Sanders are taking the lead, but of course the final votes aren't out. Where do both of these candidates stand in terms of Israel?
Well, Pete Buttigieg has been critical of Israel, particularly critical of the Netanyahu government, branding it as racist. Bernie Sanders is to the far of the left even of that. He has come out and criticized Israel very bitterly on Gaza policy, on settlements, on Jerusalem. He has sworn to restore the Iran nuclear deal. I think that a Sanders presidency would be a major strategic and moral challenge for the state of Israel.
In your eyes, who has the biggest chance of winning against Trump, or is there really any candidate right now that can challenge him?
Well, of all the candidates, the most Trumpian of the Democrats is Bernie Sanders. You can say that he's sort of the Trump of the left. Mm-hmm. The centrist candidate would be someone like Biden, along with Amy Klobuchar, and both of whom I know quite well and are very friendly to Israel, warm place in their hearts for Israel. But I don't know what their chances are right now, especially after their poor showings in Iowa.
Now, regarding Trump's peace plan, is it being discussed by the Democrats in the primaries at all?
They just sort of dismissed it out of hand. I think anything that comes out of that White House is going to be dismissed out of hand. Unfortunately, I think I've been involved in the peace process for a quarter of a century, and in many ways, it's the peace process that most reflects realities on the ground in our area, and it's a shame. In my correspondence and conversations with Democrats, I've urged them not to reject it out of hand. So far, I haven't been very successful.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Ambassador, with this update.
Okay. You be well. Bye-bye.
You too.
All right. In other news, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu is now in Africa.
Yes, he's meeting with several world leaders in efforts to normalize ties between Israel and some African nations that until now were bitter rivals.
Yeah. Arriving in Uganda on Monday, this makes the Prime Minister's 5th visit to Uganda in just 3.5 years. But this trip is more emotional than those that came before.
Every visit for me is highly moving. It stirs the chords of my soul. We landed today at right next to the terminal at ILTV, where my brother fell and where he put up a memorial honoring his memory and the memory of the others slain in the Great Rescue. I'll never forget your friendship. Israel will never forget your friendship.
Netanyahu and Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni have also already discussed strengthening bilateral cooperations in many areas, including in the fields of security, agriculture, economy, health, and water. But from Israel's side, Prime Minister Netanyahu seems to have just two goals for this visit.
One is direct flights from Israel to Uganda, direct flights, because that would enable our friendship to flourish. And second, I have a simple suggestion that you'll have time to consider, Mr. President, my friend. You open an embassy in Jerusalem, I'll open an embassy in Kampala. And we hope to do this.
Well, Museveni has since expressed great interest in opening a mission in Israel's capital, saying that he's studying the decision.
Now, if he goes through with it, Uganda would be just the third world nation to open an embassy in Jerusalem following the United States and Guatemala. Right now, Uganda doesn't have any embassy in the Jewish state at all, but one of the biggest surprises of this trip is not about Uganda, but about Sudan.
Yeah, technically, Sudan and Israel are still in a state of war with one another, but in a secret meeting hosted by Ugandan President Museveni, Netanyahu and Sudanese leader Abdel Fattah al-Burhan have now come to an agreement. The Muslim Arab country in Northeast Africa and Israel will be soon normalizing ties.
Interesting. Now, both sides involved in President Trump's new deal of the century are responding to the proposal with mixed feelings.
Yeah, but in a surprise demonstration, dozens of Israeli Arabs who identify as Palestinian are now protesting against the deal because they do not want to lose their Israeli citizenships.
The Peace to Prosperity plan envisions a Palestinian state in most of the pre-1967 borders, but it also discusses the possibility of negotiated land swaps over areas populated by residents who traditionally identify as either Israeli or Palestinian, like Al-Fahim, Al-Hulia, Kalantzaweh, and some other 11 communities in Israel's so-called Arab Triangle. In fact, the plan suggests that the whole triangle, where the majority of residents identify as Palestinian, be transferred to the Palestinian Authority, along with the 260,000-some people who live there. Arab Israelis in the triangle, on the other hand, see the move as a population transfer meant to take away their rights and reduce Arab political influence in Israel, especially as the plan comes just weeks ahead of the nation's landmark third elections.
Okay, it looks like another 400 Ethiopian Jews from the Falashmura community may be about to immigrate to Israel. Today, there are about 8,000 left in Ethiopia, and if a vote passes in next week's cabinet meeting, part of the community could make it to Israel just before the March elections. ILTV's Nittany Manson has the story.
The Falashmura are descendants of the Ethiopian Jewish community, but don't have the right to Israeli citizenship under the law of return since their ancestors converted to Christianity under duress. Today, the Israeli Interior Minister grants them entry on the basis of family reunification, and they must undergo Jewish conversion once they make it to Israel. Back in October 2018, the Israeli government approved the decision to bring 1,000 members to Israel in 2019, but only 600 came in the end. Hopefully now the remaining 400 will be granted citizenship. Critics say the newfound effort to bring more Falashmura to Israel is part of a political ploy to boost the Likud party's electoral appeal to the Ethiopian-Israeli community, but others claim that the push is simply a part of a government decision made back in 2018. Today there are an estimated 121,000 Ethiopian Jews in Israel.
Now, here's an interesting question. How do American Jews view the state of Israel? Well, a new report has some interesting insight, and ILTV's Nittany Manson joins us with the info.
Hey, Natasha. So there are a lot of claims that American Jews are drifting away from Israel over its policies related to the Palestinians and support of the Trump administration. But interestingly, a report by the Rudderman Family Foundation says something different. 8 out of 10 respondents identified as pro-Israel. That's a whopping 67%.
Now, that certainly goes against the narrative that we seem to be hearing in mainstream media.
Definitely. The foundation says that the majority of American Jews are sympathetic to Israel, and most of them feel an emotional connection to the Jewish state. And this was after they surveyed 2,500 Jews across America. But here's what's really interesting. A majority of them, 57% to be exact, said that they are pro-Israel, but critical of Israel's policy. Only 23% said that they are supportive of the current government's policies.
So it seems that politics are really the main reason that U.S. Jews have for criticizing Israel at all.
Exactly. 39% of respondents said that the Israeli Prime Minister's support for President Trump and his policies is the chief reason that they criticize Israel. 33% also said that they don't like the increasing religious right-wing political influences in Israel, and 25% said that they don't like the treatment of Palestinians.
Now, there is another interesting poll that you want to share with us regarding the Orthodox Jewish community in the U.S., right?
Yeah, that's right. The organization Nishma Research has just conducted a survey of their own. Over 1,200 members of the American Orthodox community, and apparently 66% of Haredi voters reported voting for Trump, but only 32% of modern Orthodox Jews voted for him.
Now, that's surprising to hear about with the modern Orthodox community, because Trump has really pushed an agenda that's supportive of Israel's government, which is even being driven forward by Jared Kushner, Trump's modern Orthodox son-in-law,
Yeah, well, keep this in mind. The survey came out before Trump's release of the Mideast peace deal, so the numbers may be changing a bit.
Well, I guess we'll have to wait and see. Thanks for joining us, Nittany.
Of course.
All right, well, for thousands of years, Jerusalem has served as the center point of the Jewish faith and culture. But even in the time of the first Jewish temple in Jerusalem, a period of over 400 years, not everyone in the region could pray there. Well, Israeli archaeologists from Tel Aviv University and the Israel Antiquities Authority are now unveiling another massive temple complex just 4 miles or 7 kilometers away from the old city's Temple Mount.
An incredible and ancient Jewish prayer site just north of the old city of Jerusalem is now offering Israelis a glimpse into the lives of their ancestors. And researchers say that the site at Tel Motza, originally discovered in 2012, may have been an alternative to the Temple Mount. But it also reveals some of the customs of the earliest Jews. The IAA says that Tel Motza was most likely sanctioned by the main Jerusalem government at the time. In fact, the temple at Tel Motza, circa 900 BCE, even has the same architectural plan as King Solomon's temple in Jerusalem, albeit it was just about 2/3 the size of the real thing. And it serviced a community that's estimated to have existed there for nearly 9,000 years. Now, among the discoveries at Tel Motza so far, there are animal figurines, a refuse pit with bone and pottery remains, a stone-built offering table, chalices, furniture, and much, much more. And researchers are confident that they'll find even more amazing relics as excavations go on. Part of the floor plan, several walls, and whatever lies among them still have yet to be unearthed. Then finally, the site at Tel Motza is also the first large-scale purpose-built temple in the region of Judah outside of Jerusalem. But excavators believe that it won't be the last.
Moving on, pregnant women endure a ton of testing to make sure that they're staying healthy and happy along with their little ones. But a new Israeli algorithm may actually cut down on at least one annoying exam. Here's the scoop.
The glucose tolerance test. It's a perfectly normal exam where expecting mothers drink what is essentially pure sugar to rule out gestational diabetes. The disease develops in 3 to 9% of all pregnancies, and if left untreated, it poses a huge threat to both mother and child. But that doesn't make the test any more enjoyable. So Israeli researchers from the Weizmann Institute of Science have now come up with a solution, a simple 9-question survey. The questionnaire was developed by a recently Israeli-made machine learning algorithm that was applied to over 600,000 Israeli health records. And it decided, after reviewing the data, that it can pick out mothers at risk of gestational diabetes just by looking into their age, BMI, family history of diabetes, and the result of prior glucose tests from previous pregnancies. Those who score as high risk can then go on to take further testing, but the rest can be spared from further poking and prodding.
All right, now the world is continuing to react to the release of U.S. President Donald Trump's so-called Mideast peace deal of the century. And now the Israeli president is speaking out. Israelis and Palestinians are not doomed to live together. It's our destiny to live together. That's a message from Israeli President Reuven Rivlin, who is now calling for the resumption of direct peace negotiations with the Palestinians. His statement comes just days after U.S. President Donald Trump released his long-awaited Mideast peace deal, which the Palestinians have outright rejected. Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas has threatened to cut all relations with Jerusalem and Washington in response to the release of the deal. But he still seems to be hinting that security ties with Israel and the U.S. remain intact. Today, Israel and the Palestinians coordinate between police forces and share information regarding terrorist cells in the West Bank. Palestinian forces have have also received training from the US and other Western countries. Well, now the European Union also seems to be bickering about Trump's peace deal. Last week, Josep Borrell, the EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, tried to convince 27 European foreign ministers to issue a resolution criticizing the so-called peace deal of the century. Israel's foreign ministry lobbied hard against it, and in the end, 6 countries blocked it, including Italy, Hungary, and the Czech Republic. All right, now I have been waiting for the right moment to talk about this. I was so impressed by this year's Super Bowl halftime performance, and if you somehow missed this monumental occasion, Shakira and J-Lo brought their Latin American flair to the stage. Of course, I forced everyone in the control room to watch the magic, as you know.
Oh, yeah.
But yes, what does this have to do with Israel? You're probably asking. Well, it turns out that J-Lo's performance of Let's Get Loud with her daughter Emmy was actually inspired by an Israeli singing group. Let's take a listen first.
If you wanna live your life, live it all the way and don't you waste it. Every feeling, every beat can be so very sweet, you gotta taste it. Let's get loud, let's get loud. Turn the music up, let's do it. Come on people, let's get loud. Let's get loud.
Gosh, that's such a powerful performance. And honestly, like, I got chills, which I didn't think a J-Lo performance would actually do for me, to be honest.
I know, that's fair. Well, J-Lo was apparently inspired by the Israeli singing movement Kululam. They bring thousands of people together from all walks of life and teach them how to sing songs in an incredibly powerful way. So in October of 2019, Kululam did a cover of J-Lo's Let's Get Loud to mark Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And the Latino superstar was apparently so wowed by it. Look, take a look.
Okay, ladies, are you ready? Let's do it.
Let's get loud, let's get loud. Turn the music up, let's do it. Come on, people, let's get.
Kululam is amazing. I see you dancing.
Yeah, you should be dancing
No,
too.
they're an amazing and talented
They
group. But how many people were singing there?
Well, there were more than 2,000 men and women in that crowd. And now when J-Lo saw it, her team reached out to Kululam and told them that she wanted to actually use part of their version in the Super Bowl. As you can imagine, the Kululam staff went crazy when they heard about this. And now they say that they have a new goal, which is to perform in the Super Bowl themselves.
All right, well, for some reason, I think that they're going to be able to pull that off. And I hope that they do.
I do. That would be crazy to think about the
would be
entire
amazing.
audience of the Super Bowl participating in a song.
Sure. One more reason to watch the Super Bowl in Israel, I guess.
We'll see if it happens. That's it for ILTV's Weekly Review. See you next week.